Our next story is about a man whose voice and face were familiar to generations of Americans. And although Joe Besser today might be best remembered as one of the Three Stooges, that was just one of the roles he had on stage, screen, and television. It was a long career that started right here in St. Louis. Well, I like this one because here he is with
Ann Miller.
Ann Miller in
1955.
Sandra Hill has a whole bunch of photographs and mementos of her Uncle Joe, her mother's brother. She remembers him as being a nice, sweet man who happened to be in show business. Baby boomers probably remember Joe Besser best from the Three Stooges film shown on KPLR's Captain 11 program.
Hello.
Joe was Shemp's replacement in the last of the Stooges comedy shorts.
Not so hard.
But the character they saw was one he had spent years developing and may have been familiar already to their parents and grandparents.
I wasn't leaving Paris.
Besser's show business career had started when he was still in grade school, back in his hometown of St. Louis. He was born in 1907 in a neighborhood just north of downtown. He was the youngest child of Morris and Fanny Besser, Orthodox Jews from Eastern Europe. Growing up, Joe loved going to the vaudeville theaters in town. His older brother Manny was already in show business as an ethnic Jewish comedian. But Joe's favorite act was Thurston the Magician, and he saw him every time he came to town.
And he would go to the theater and sit in the audience and heckle him. And the people used to laugh. So he went backstage and met Thurston, and Thurston liked what he did and wanted him to keep it up.
Thurston told Joe he could not travel with the act until he was older, but the 12-year-old stowed away with Thurston's baggage, slept on the lion's cage on a train headed for Detroit. He had told only his sister, Sandra Hill's mother, his plans.
And the next morning when they got up for breakfast, my grandpa said, "Where's Yassel?" And my mother said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but he ran away with Thurston."
It was the start of a long career as a comedian. In the 1920s, he traveled the vaudeville circuit teaming with a couple of different straight men and was part of successful Broadway revues like Olson and Johnson's Sons of Fun. In the late 1930s, he went to Hollywood to appear in one of his first films. But it was really on radio where Joe Besser made his mark, with regular appearances on the Jack Benny, Fred Allen, and Milton Berle shows. And his whiny, childlike delivery made "Not So Fast" and "You Crazy You" into popular catchphrases for a national audience. But when Joe visited his mother and relatives in St. Louis, his niece saw only rare glimpses of what made her uncle famous.
He was a different person, yes. My girlfriend came over and wanted him to perform, and he said, "Honey, it doesn't work that way."
But in all those times you saw him, you never actually saw him do that little boy character.
Oh, this. He would always do, "You crazy you." He would do that with my mother.
Joe Besser was one of those vaudeville and radio performers who went right into early television. In the early 50s, he played, what else, a bratty little boy named Stinky on the Abbott and Costello Show. Besser and Lou Costello were neighbors and best friends. It's easy to see why Mo Howard thought of Joe Besser when he needed to replace Shemp on the Three Stooges, and Besser always needed to keep working.
When he went there, he said he had his fingers crossed because that's what he wanted, and he wasn't sure he'd get it, and he was very happy when he got with the Stooges.
Hey, what are we going to do?
Besser actually got paid more than Mo and Larry to make their final 16 short films, and after 2 years he decided to leave the Stooges. Joe DeRita would be the third Stooge in their feature films and in personal appearances on local TV shows like St. Louis's Captain 11. Besser said he enjoyed his time with the Stooges and never regretted moving on.
People will remember him as
Jilson,
the janitor on the Joey Bishop Show, sure.
That was in the early 1960s, and he would later get some roles on programs like Love American Style. But he knew his style of comedy was out of fashion, and at the end of his career, he continued to work voicing characters for cartoons.
But was he
a wealthy guy? Did he make a lot of money in show business?
No.
Or he just had, he had to keep working?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess...
They didn't pay like they do today.
No. And all those TV shows he did, there was none of those contracts.
Not
that
residuals, ever.
Look! Diamonds! Emeralds!
Then what about the Stooges stuff? Because that stuff is still out there. Was there any money in that form?
No.
Ow, that hurts!
Joe Besser wrote about his life in show business in a book he originally titled Not Just a Stooge. The publisher later changed it to Once a Stooge, Always a Stooge. And he never did turn his back on those years. In 1983, after Moe and Larry had passed away, Joe Besser appeared with their daughters when the Stooges got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The little stage-struck Jewish kid who had run away from home in St. Louis died in 1988 at the age of 80 in Hollywood, California. But it was a good career. I mean, he did exactly what he wanted, didn't he?
He did. He knew from the beginning what he wanted. He wanted comedy, and he wanted on the stage. He loved every minute of what he did.